And, in the final years of the Second World War, the balance of power tilted inexorably against Nazi Germany. On the battlefields of Europe, and the Wehrmacht faced not only the Red Army surging from the east, but also the combined might of the Western Allies. And yet one of the most shocking revelations for German generals was not a devastating new weapon or a secret Allied plan. Instead, it was a number, and 300,000, the number of aircraft the United States claimed it would produce by the end of the war. And, to men hardened by years of combat and schooled in the ruthless mathematics of warfare, such a claim sounded like little more than a propaganda stunt. But as the skies above Europe darkened wave after wave of Allied bombers and fighters, the impossible became undeniable. And this is the story of how German generals dismissed America's vast industrial promise, and only to discover that the United States would unleash an air armada on a scale beyond their imagination. Background: and Germany's early confidence. When the Second World War began in September 1939, Germany stood at the peak of military innovation. And its Luftwaffe had already terrorized the skies over Poland and would soon unleash devastation across Western Europe. The Blitzkrieg strategy relied on speed, coordination, and air superiority. And German commanders had every reason to believe that no other nation could match their aircraft production in time to matter. The Luftwaffe entered the war with around 4,000 combat aircraft. By comparison, the United States had fewer than 3,000 aircraft in total, and many of them obsolete. America was still reeling from the Great Depression, and its military infrastructure remained geared for peacetime. To German eyes, and the claim that such a nation could outproduce them seemed ludicrous. America's promise, the arsenal of democracy, in 1940, as the world descended into war, and President Franklin D. Roosevelt made a bold declaration. The United States, he said, and would become the arsenal of democracy. Factories that had once produced automobiles, refrigerators, and consumer goods would now build tanks, ships, and an aircraft in staggering numbers. In 1942, the U.S. government announced that American industry would produce 300,000 aircraft by the war's end. For the Luftwaffe High Command, such numbers were unthinkable. To them, it was pure propaganda intended to frighten Axis powers and inspire Allied citizens. And Hermann Göring, the flamboyant and increasingly delusional head of the Luftwaffe, scoffed at the idea. And he dismissed the American industrial machine as undisciplined, incapable of sustaining such an ambitious target. But the United States possessed something Germany did not: resources. With abundant oil, steel, aluminum, and a vast civilian economy ready to be converted into wartime production, America was poised to wage total war on a scale the Nazis could scarcely imagine. And the reality of American production, while German generals scoffed, American factories roared to life. And the Ford Motor Company's Willow Run plant in Michigan became the largest factory under one roof in the world. It produced a B-24 Liberator bomber every 63 minutes. Across the nation, women entered the workforce in unprecedented numbers, and becoming the iconic Rosie the Rivers, who riveted fuselages, welded frames, and assembled engines. By 1944, and the United States produced nearly 100,000 aircraft in a single year, more than Germany would produce in the entire course of the war. American assembly lines churned out iconic machines: the B-17 Flying Fortress, the P-51 Mustang, the P-47 Thunderbolt, and the B-29 Superfortress, and whose wings would later darken the skies over Japan. What had once sounded like propaganda now became a terrifying reality, and German reactions and genial German generals, steeped in the traditions of Prussian military calculation, and initially dismissed reports of American output as exaggerated. To them, and propaganda leaflets and intelligence estimates suggesting hundreds of thousands of aircraft seemed absurd. And surely no nation could mobilize on such a scale without collapsing its economy, even as their own cities burned under Allied bombing raids. And many German leaders clung to the belief that America's industrial might would falter. They believed that the vast distances of the Atlantic and the Pacific, and coupled with America's supposed lack of fighting spirit, would prevent the United States from fully realizing its goals. Yet by 1943, and Luftwaffe pilots could see the truth with their own eyes. Missions over Germany brought them face to face with endless formations of Allied bombers, and escorted by swarms of fighters, reports to Berlin grew increasingly grim. German aces spoke of skies so thick with American aircraft that they blotted out the sun. The turning point, air supremacy, the reality struck hardest during the combined bomber offensive of 1943 and 1944, and with American bombers striking German industry by day and British bombers hammering cities by night, the Reich faced a relentless assault. The Luftwaffe, and once the terror of Europe, found itself overwhelmed. Skilled pilots were lost faster than they could be replaced. Fuel shortages crippled training programs, and aircraft production, hampered by Allied bombing, lagged far behind. In 1944, Germany managed to build around 40,000 aircraft. Impressive, but only a fraction of what the United States achieved. One German general bitterly remarked that the Allies had not just air superiority, but air supremacy. For the first time in modern warfare, one side had achieved complete dominance of the skies, rendering the other virtually powerless. And the human cost for German civilians, America's industrial triumph translated into devastation. And entire cities were reduced to rubble by fleets of bombers that German flak and fighters could no longer stop. Hamburg, Dresden, Cologne, and Berlin all suffered catastrophic destruction. For Allied crews, the sheer numbers of aircraft did not make missions less dangerous, and thousands of American and British airmen lost their lives in the skies over Europe. But the difference was stark. While Germany could not afford such losses, and the Allies could, American production ensured that for every bomber shot down, another would roll off the assembly line to replace it. Aftermath and reflection: by 1945, the United States had produced over 300,000 aircraft, and fulfilling the promise that German generals once dismissed as propaganda. The Luftwaffe, once a symbol of Nazi power, was reduced to scattered remnants, and German officers, captured and interrogated after the war, admitted their disbelief at the scale of American production. And they had underestimated not only American industry, but also the will of an entire nation mobilized for total war. And this miscalculation had profound consequences. Believing America's claims to be exaggerated, and German leaders continued their war effort under the illusion that time was on their side. In reality, they were fighting an opponent with virtually limitless resources. And the story of Germany's disbelief in America's aircraft production is more than a tale of numbers. And it is a lesson in the dangers of underestimating an adversary. And the German generals who scoffed at the idea of 300,000 American planes found themselves overwhelmed by an air armada unlike anything in history. And what they dismissed as propaganda became one of the decisive factors in the Allied victory. The skies over Europe, once ruled by the Luftwaffe, became the domain of American bombers and fighters. And in that dominance,
the ranks of Germany for the new second level, all been fascinated involvement with the development of the authority between Mrs. Helene, the over the son of the wall, the system, the system, what are you going to listen to the walls, the